But the biggest lesson I've learned along the way is that you have to do it for yourself. And for your fans, you want people to enjoy your music. But if you're doing it for the money or for the fame, it's like the wrong reason. It's like you have to do it because you can't do anything else, because you want to.
Welcome to the Female Entrepreneur Musician Podcast with Bree Noble. Bree is a musician, entrepreneur, speaker, and founder of Women of Substance Music Radio and Podcast. Bree's interviews with successful female musicians and industry pros are both inspirational and informational. She also answers your questions about the music business. Bree is on a mission to help you create great music, connect with your fans, and grow your business, and to truly become a female entrepreneur musician.
Hey, this is Bree Noble, and I am so excited that you are listening to the Female Entrepreneur Musician Podcast, where we talk about making great music, connecting to your audience, and growing your business. I am so pumped to get back into some great interviews for the new year. And my interview today is with one of my favorite artists that I've known for quite a long time, Stacie Rose. I know you're going to really learn a lot from her interview. And one thing we discuss in her interview is some licensing opportunities that she's had, having her songs licensed for film and television and the kind of income that she gets from those opportunities. And it's perfectly timed because I have a workshop coming up with my friend Michelle Lockie from Licensing Songs Academy, where she's going to be teaching you guys how you can make money from licensing your music to film and TV. So I really highly encourage you, if you have any interest in this at all, to sign up for this workshop, femmusician.com/069. And just sign up for one of the times on January 12th. And if you are listening to this after January 12th, we are planning on having more workshops in the future. So just check that page and see if there's a workshop time that works for you. Now, let's talk about our guest today, Stacie Rose, and you'll find out how this music licensing theme ties into her story in a minute. The songs of Stacie Rose, often hailed as hooky gems by the media, have been heard on AMC, ABC, FX, MTV, Oxygen, E! Network, VH1, American Airlines Radio, and SiriusXM. Often called an artist you should know about, Stacie has somehow stayed true to her independent, make your own rules as you go roots. Always writing and singing, Stacie is currently working on her 6th album and is excited to share it with you. So here's my interview with Stacie Rose. So that's a little bit about Stacie Rose. So Stacie, is there anything that's not in your bio that maybe is a little more personal, a little more unique about you that maybe people don't necessarily know when they read about you on paper?
Well, I would say from a very personal standpoint, I don't know if people know much about me, like really personally, about my life, my home life, or my upbringing, or anything like that. Let me think of a couple of things that might be of interest. I married my high school sweetheart. I have a 5-year-old son. As people listen to your music, I don't know, it's hard sometimes to separate fact from fiction when you're listening to music, because especially when you don't really know people that well, and also songs take on their own shape and their own meaning when you're listening to them. But maybe something of interest is that my songs truly do mirror where I am in my life and what's going on at that particular time. So if you were to listen to my discography, like if you're going to listen album by album by album, and that's a lot of listening, but if you were to do that, you'd probably get a sense of what life seemed like to me at certain times, and things I may have been going through, because I tend to write myself through my life. Like my music is my medicine, it's my therapy, and it's the way I get through things, whether they're good or bad. I mean, I guess especially during bad times, I really, really sink myself into my music, so to speak. But even in good times, that's the best way I can express how I'm really feeling. And it always has been. It's just music has been my greatest vehicle for expression my whole life. So
yeah, I think that a lot of songwriters can identify with that. It becomes kind of our journal, our diary in a way.
Absolutely.
And we say things in songs we probably would never say when we were telling someone something. It's amazing what we'll say, right?
Absolutely. And I think exactly. And I guess because like songs in a weird way, because once you push them out into the world, they become like part of the collective somehow. And so that's kind of like a buffer. It's like, yeah, it's like your heart on your sleeve, but then you send it out in the world and it's kind of like just out there and it's not really, it's attached to you, but not, it's hard to explain, but
it kind of becomes its own entity, and then it means different things to different people. It doesn't have to mean the same thing that it did to you who wrote it.
Exactly that. It's exactly that. And
yeah, that's, I think, when it becomes art, when it takes on its own identity.
And frankly, that's the part, and that's sort of like the exchange of it. That's when you kind of turn it over to the outside world and or the world at large, and that happens. And sometimes people will say, "Oh my God, you wrote that song about me." And like people will joke around that like it was so much mirroring of their life, because we all are human and we all go through so many of the same things. And that's what makes music so connect. Like that's where the connectivity is that like, you know, people say there's only a finite amount of chords, so all musicians are just using the same. You know, the reason songs sound the same sometimes, or parts sound the same, is we're all working with the same chords. It's just the way you use them. It's the way you use the music. It's the way you use your voice. It's the way you scramble things up. But I think it's the same with emotions. We all have the same emotions, and they all have to get out there. And we go through so many of the same things at different times of our lives. So, you know, I wrote a song called Disaster a while back, and a lot of my friends were like, "Oh my God, that's so my life." And it made me so happy, because I was like, you know, A, I don't feel as alone in that feeling that I felt when I wrote it, but also B, you know, that it's reached somebody somehow. And that's where the beauty is in making music and then pushing it out there.
Definitely. So, and I cannot believe that your son is already 5. I mean, it just seems like I was reading about you having a baby like last year. So time flies. How does that work with your, you know, the way you run your career?
It's funny that you said time flies, because it's crazy for me to even think about him being 5, because I feel like he was just a baby. And how it's worked with my career is it's done so many interesting things. Just, you know, when he was born, I really had to change my whole way of pacing myself, as anybody would do with a baby. But I never quite got that in life. I never knew how to pace myself with anything. And I never understood. I kind of just went at everything full force, full speed all the time. It was like that was the only way I did things. And it's just patience. Like I've had to learn patience and timing and balance. And it brings a different sensibility to your music and your approach when making music. And it's just taught me a lot of things. And it's been really good for me. It's been like when he was 1.5, I made Star Stripes and Milestones. And a lot of those songs were about the time leading up to his birth and then after he was born. So that was really amazing, because I was filled with inspiration. I felt more fertile than ever in a songwriting way. I was just thinking about everything and changing my ideas, and just so many things were flooding my heart and my mind. So it was a really wonderful time for expressing myself. And you know, babies sleep a lot. So actually, he didn't sleep enough, but the amount that they do sleep, it afforded me a lot of time to write. So when he was a baby, he would nap and I would write, and I would sing softly and write songs. And it was such an amazing, transformative time for me. And I was just writing all the time. So when he was, I guess about 1, I think about 1.5, I started making that album. And I did it differently than I had done anything else before, you know, like where I'd stretched out recording over months and months and months. I recorded the whole album in a weekend at a house up in the Poconos. And that was an amazing new experience and a different way of making music, just like getting into a certain mood with some people and just going for it. It was amazing. And it was like a new experience, a new way of making music. I've been writing the songs and crafting them over many, many months, but the actual recording of it happened really fast and spontaneously. And that was new. And then ever since then, I've been writing, playing a gig here and there when I can, licensing music, making music, you know, continuing on with everything. And now I'm in the middle of another album that I'm halfway through right now recording. And this is another thing, because now he's 5 and he's in kindergarten and there's so much going on in our lives. So again, I've had to figure out, okay, how can I do this now that it fits into the landscape of our lives? And I've kind of found another way to make this album that's working now. And that's, I think, what it's about is just no matter what's going on in your life, no matter how much time you have, it's just making it work, finding a way to make it work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're right. Like I made my first album so differently than I did, like say my holiday album that I made when my kids were older, but I had to get not too old, not old enough to watch themselves. So I had to like build babysitting costs into the cost of recording my album, but yet I recorded it myself in my own house and then like sent the kids away to a babysitter, so you just kind of have to figure out how to make it work with your life at the time. Right. And everyone is probably going to be different.
That's a perfect example. And it's managing things the best way you can to make it happen. And I've gotten so much more creative with that and so much more patient with myself, because I know that at the end of the day, that this is really important to me. And I couldn't envision my life without making this music. And this album that I'm making now, I joke around with people all the time, like that it's going to be, well, hopefully a better album, but that it's like my Chinese democracy. Like it's, like Axl Rose, I think it took him 13 years to make that album. And I'm sure it'll be nothing like that album. But the thing is, it's just, I'm 5 songs in. It's been less than a year actually, but that's how much, like in the past, I move so quickly. I get a head full of steam about something and I just plow ahead. And with this, I recorded 5 songs and now I've done backing vocals and now they're being mixed. And it's just, it might be another 6 months before the second half is finished, but it's okay with me, where before it wasn't. Before I'd be like, no, must move forward, must be productive and make this happen. But it's like, things are worth waiting for, and it's better to do it right and do it when you can and do it the way it's going to actually work and sound good.
For sure. Have you considered breaking it into 2 EPs? I'm just curious if you're like very set on like, I need to have full albums.
It's funny because I've thought about that a little bit, and I don't know if I'm sure you've heard it, but I had done the alter ego EPs. I think you had played something off of those.
Yes, absolutely.
And I ended up doing that with those, but I released them together. But because the sides of the albums were so different, I did them as like 2 separate EPs and they were released at the same time. So I'm totally not against that idea. I guess the only reason I've been clinging to putting it together as a whole album is that there's a group of songs that I had written, together. So I kind of felt like it'd be great to have them exist together. But then it's in today's world, the way people experience music, it may not matter anyway. So it's just at the end of the day, a matter of like what my heart tells me to do, because I realize that most people today don't listen to an album from beginning to end. They listen to songs, which is another incentive for every song to really be good and stand on its own. Because,
definitely.
Because you can't hide behind the fact that, it's just going to get mushed into an album. Not that I would ever do that.
It's an album track.
Right, exactly. Because every track has to be its own individual piece of beauty somehow, which is great. So I'm not really sure. It's funny that you brought that up, because I have been thinking about that recently since 5 songs are done. I'll keep you posted for sure.
Well, I got super excited about talking about all this stuff, and we got a little bit of ahead of things. I want to find out how you got started in music.
Well, I would say I got started really early on. Well, actually, I just thought of this right now, that I really got started when I was 4 in lollipop school. And I had the opportunity to sing You're a Grand Old Flag by myself. It was like my first ever solo. And it's so funny that I can remember this. I don't remember faces or anything like that, but I remember being in front of a lot of people and just like belting it out. Like it could have been, Stop Dragging My Heart Around or something. Like I was 4 singing You're a Grand Old Flag, and it was just belting it out. Like, this is the song. It was like my rock and roll at the time, but it was my big moment. And it was the only time I'd ever sung in front of a crowd, and I just loved it. So that was my first, I think that was where I was like, oh my God, this is really amazing. But then after that, I was in school talent shows, and I did theater whenever I could, and especially musical theater. And I was in every choir that I could be in.
Yeah, that was me too.
Really?
Yep, every choir.
Yeah, like anything like, and I didn't care if I sung soprano or alto, like wherever my voice was at the time, I just wanted to sing. Like it didn't really matter to me that I had a certain, it was just like I just had to sing. It was like, it wasn't just the singing, it was like, it was the lyrics. Cause I distinctly remember being in my parents' car. Um, and every song on the radio, it's like I had to not just know the way it went, but I had to memorize, like I had to remember the choruses and I had to know the lyrics. So I would like really quickly take note of the words, even though I probably at such a young age didn't even know what I was singing about. But it's like it was the lyrics and it was all of it. And in high school, I was in choir in high school and I did the musical theater. But my boyfriend at the time, who was the guy I ended up marrying later on in life, but he had guitars, and I was totally fascinated. I'd always taken piano lessons growing up, and he had guitars. He had electric guitars, and he had drums and acoustic guitars. So I stole one of his acoustic guitars. I mean, he let me steal it, but he gave it to me to borrow for like a week, and I had it forever. And I just started like I didn't really know how to play it, but he was teaching me a chord here, a chord there, and I just started writing songs with like the three chords that I knew. And then I took more lessons in college off campus, and that was kind of a big deal. I would like, go to this cool guitar guy's place, and I would get lessons, and he had this sort of like non-conventional way of teaching, which was really cool to me in college. And I was writing all the time through college, but not really playing. Like I'd be at a party and people would be like, will you play us a song? And I would always need like a drink before I could play because I was too nervous. But then once I got going, I was into it. I was totally into it. So I would say in college is how I really got started with the songwriting aspect, where I was really actively writing songs. And then,
Did you study music in college?
I didn't, I was always winging it. I was, like I said, I was taking lessons. But I was always kind of going by feel and by ear all the time. And, I'd had some musical background with musical theater, and I had taken piano lessons. So I had some musical background, but not a formal background by any means. But I just had the ear for it. And I was always, the other thing too is, I guess, my lack of a real musical background as far as studying music. It allowed me to experiment because I had no restrictions. Like I didn't really know which chords I was playing early on. I eventually learned, but early on I didn't know which. I knew like a few chords, what they were, but then I was just noodling around on the fret and just finding chords. So what happened was after college, I started taking lessons again, and this teacher was trying to teach me music theory. And I came in, I just played him a couple of my songs, and he was like, you know what? I don't want to like undo what you're doing. He's like, because you have your own way of playing and your own rhythm and your own sensibility. And he's like, and a lot of people, like Joni Mitchell, and I'm not comparing myself to Joni Mitchell, but you had like Richie Havens and Joni Mitchell, and a lot of people that had their own strumming style, like had their own way of playing it. I mean, everyone has, like Lucinda Williams and the Stones, people have their own way of sort of doing things, but sometimes the lack of theory, if you will, gives you sort of that right, not the right, but you just find your way and you make it up as you go and you just feel your way. And,
right. You're not second guessing yourself.
Right. So later on, when I would be making records and getting songs licensed, and I would be like a legit artist, I would be working with these amazing musicians like I do now that are so well versed and like so have so much theory under their belt, and they're amazing musicians. And like they'll be like, oh, you went from that chord to that chord. How cool. And I'm like, oh my God, they think it's cool. And half the time I don't even know why I went. I just like the way it sounded. So it's been like a little bit of a, like I said, I like to know more theory, and probably eventually I'll delve into that. But it's been kind of cool for me to just, just go with my gut with music, because a lot of music is that anyway. Whether you know what you're doing, whether you know it or you don't, it's like you need that going for you no matter what. So that kind of worked to my advantage, I guess, early on, and maybe set me apart a little bit because I was just kind of like delving into all these strange places and just going for it.
That's really cool. So at this point, do you consider yourself a full-time musician, a part-time musician? Do you have other things that you do?
Okay, well, yeah, that's kind of like a double. It's a two-sided thing. I have like, I consider myself full-time in the respect that I'm always making music. I'm always playing. I'm always, doing some music video project, like working on a music video or making an album or co-writing with somebody or writing something for television. So I'm always making music. So I consider myself very full-time in that respect. Am I making my entire living making music? I wouldn't say that that would be the case. I have worked so I've done things in my life and made career moves that have afforded me the time and space to actually make music. So here's something. So I've worked in television for a lot of years, freelance. When I started working in television, I also had started a band, but I started working in television basically to be able to live and to have an apartment in New York City, because I really wanted to have a place in New York City, but I wanted to have a band and I wanted to be able to afford like a music space, which was actually in the music building on 8th Avenue. And I wanted to be able to, work with musicians and, pay for instruments and stuff, pay for gear and things like that. So basically one of my main reasons, it wasn't my only reason for wanting to work, but I was basically being able to do my music by having a job when I first started, which was in television. And it sort of propelled me forward. And I loved working in television. And I've been freelancing ever since and basically doing promos for TV and always on a freelance basis, which ended up great because if I did any touring, I was always able to take the time. Since I was on a project to project basis, I would just not take a project if it interfered with something I wanted to do musically. And then the two things started to intertwine, where people in television would be like, "Oh, she could write a song for this spot that we're doing, or we can license her music for this show." So the two started to kind of play into each other. And sometimes people would hire me just to sing a song, to cover a song for a show. So it became like a good fit of things to do and a way I could have income and support the music I was making and also be able to make music independently, be able to make my own albums. Like I never had to wait for the validation of a record label to be like, we'll sign you and then we'll make your album. Like I was able to make my albums when I wanted to by doing that. And the way that I wanted to. And it was always on a budget. It's not like I ever had, $5 million to put towards an album, but I was able to do it, on my own terms all the time that way. So that worked.
No, that was really smart, the way that you did that. And at this point, do you have your own record label? Are you working with an indie label? What's the label situation?
Well, I basically early on, I started my own label so that I could release my albums legitimately. And I set up everything. I trademarked, I released everything, copyright, everything is legitimately done through the label. And I basically did that so that I could put albums out when I wanted, how I wanted. And it worked out really, really, really well. And I've sort of been navigating the quote unquote label terrain as an independent artist, but also as somebody who's owns their own label. So I've sort of been taking notes along the way from everyone I've met in every instance I've been in. Like I've been in label situations, like I've recorded with artists like with Sony and overseas, and I've done all kinds of interesting things that have allowed me to sort of learn how things are done.
Yeah, I think you've done it really smartly. It reminds me a lot of my conversation with Rachel Sage. She has kind of a similar path to you, where she set up her own label. Now she's got a bunch of other artists under her and kind of built the label. Do you have any other artists, or is it just a vehicle for you?
It's just a vehicle for me, but I have actually thought about bringing other artists onto the label. It just would have to be the right fit and, the right time. But, I actually have thought about that, and it's something that I might want to consider down the line. But it really has been a vehicle for me, like I said, like you understand, to just get the stuff out into the world and do it in a really smart, efficient way. That's sort of it's legitimate as far as like the way that I do everything, but it's also the whole independent aspect of it. And maybe you've talked about this with Rachel. It gives you the license to make your own rules sometimes.
Oh, for sure. But it also gives you, I don't want to say legitimacy, because it's not like any independent artist is not legitimate, but it puts like a different kind of face or something on what you're doing that's a little more professional, at least in my, my experience with dealing with you and with Rachel. Like, it's just a little bit of a different experience than dealing with an individual, because there's kind of this thing behind you.
Well, I can see that. And I actually appreciate you saying that. And a lot of it has just been along the way, just kind of like standing up for yourself and the music that you believe in and sort of making it as official as possible, not just dabbling or really waiting for anybody else to validate. Even if they do, I mean, it's wonderful when people do. It's just that it's about standing up for your music and believing that it's worth being heard. And by doing it this way, it sort of gives you, like you said, a little bit more. People take you a little more seriously, and they're willing to look, they're willing to listen, and with that comes, and maybe other artists, maybe Rachel, maybe other artists you've talked to have felt this way. With it becomes a little bit more responsibility too, because you can't really just like hide behind the fact that, oh, I'm independent. Like, then you really have to, you have to sort of do everything the right way.
Yeah, you have to have the package that goes along with the face that you're presenting.
Right, which means there's a lot that goes along with that, and it's marketing, and it's a website, and it's keeping things current, and it's reaching out to people, and it's just it's a lot of work to do that. Like, to have your own label, it's funny because it's not just like giving yourself a name and then slapping it on the back of an album. It's so much work to keep everything going, but it's worth it when, like you said, when people take notice and they listen to the music, and then it starts finding its way into cool places. And, it's just, you got to keep up. It's a lot to keep up with.
For sure. I love the journey that you've been on, and the smart way that you built all of it along the way. Is there anything that you can share with some of our listeners that may be struggling in those early stages? A story maybe of a time when you felt like, oh my gosh, this isn't working. Maybe I should just give up and figure out something different for my life. And a way that you maybe hit that wall, but then you were able to push through that, and what you learned from it, and, how you made it out to the other side.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you. And for that. And second of all, yeah, there's so many ups and downs in music. And I think any artist should admit that. I mean, could admit that sometimes, I've had in my music career, definitely ups and downs, and things that have propelled me to move forward, and then things that have sort of stopped me in my tracks and made me rethink things a little bit. You get breaks in music. Sometimes, like, you get a great gig where like a club will invite you to play, and you're like, wow, this is such a great gig. You start out playing small clubs, and if you're doing a live thing, and I think I would suggest to artists that it's always good to get in front of people, because I know this in this day and age, a lot of people just make music and shoot it out over the internet, which is totally cool. But getting in front of people is really has its merits, and it's really where a lot of the beautiful stuff happens. So I would definitely suggest getting in front of people any which way you can. But it was just, every gig. When I first got my gig at like the bitter end, and I just remember, people coming up and being like, wow, that was really good. And that felt good. And then, then I would start to play it, the Mercury Lounge and other places, Village Underground. And it's like, you start to build on it and you get momentum. And then, I went to Nashville, and I was like, wow, Nashville will have me, and these festivals will have me. And then radio stations invite you. And then you start to get like a little bit of momentum going. But then sometimes with music, like, it stops for a minute, because then, as you're laughing, because, what happens, it's really like that. It's like an ebb and flow. And you get like this momentum, and then it just stops for a minute. Or maybe your album is like, okay, everyone's listened to it and everyone's taking a break for a minute, or whatever it is. Or maybe the money runs out, but whatever, and you have to stop touring, or whatever it is, you have to stop making the album. It's just important, I would say, to just keep going any way you can. And if you have to stop for a minute, that's okay too, because the best thing about music is you can always get back on. Like, it's never, I mean, you see all these amazing artists that are well into their 50s and 60s and whatever they are. And it's like, there's never a bad time to make music. You can always do it. You can take a break and you can get back in. You can, kind of fall out of favor. And then this has happened with so many artists. I think everybody has seen this happen. You fall out of favor and someone doesn't like your album, somebody doesn't like your song, and then someone else does. Or you've got, or a lot of fans do, and people all of a sudden start taking to it. But the biggest lesson I've learned along the way is that you have to do it for yourself. And for your fans. You want people to enjoy your music. But if you're doing it for the money or for the fame, it's like the wrong reason. It's like you have to do it because you can't do anything else, because you want to. It's like you can't do it because you want to be famous, or it's like about making a lot of money. If the money comes, the money comes. But I think everybody sees in this music climate that we're living in, it's hard to make money as an artist. Money can be made. I license my songs, and those have been some of my huge successes. I've licensed quite a bit of my music over the years, and that's been amazing. And I'm so grateful to the people that have put me on like high profile shows. And then I get, money from ASCAP back. And it helps me pay for more recording, and it helps me pay for things, for gigs and things like that. But it's like you do it because you love to do it. And that's where you do your best work, because it's flowing through you and you can't do anything else. And I think you just always have to keep perspective. It's like, there's always going to be an audience for music. People love music. So make it and get it out there any which way you can. And the best thing about today is, when I started making music, there weren't as many vehicles. There weren't as many ways of getting it out there. So people were really set on getting a record deal, which is one of the things, that I feel like sort of proud of my younger self for, that I was like, screw that, excuse my French. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to get it out there one way or the other. And, it's sort of that steadfastness and that sort of fearlessness that people need to have. Like, you really need to just, as sensitive as artists are, and that's great because that's where the music, the writing goes, with the sensitivity that you put it onto the music, and you get the best stuff by just like laying your heart out there. But you also have to have a fearlessness and a backbone about it. And I would just say you have to stand up to it. You have to stand up for what you've got. If you have good music, get it out there. There's SoundCloud. There's a million different ways now to get your music out into the world, whether it's live, whether it's, put it on iTunes, just get it out there, because nothing can happen if nobody hears it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think you make a good point, like, about music, and not to get worried if, for some reason, all of a sudden you feel like you're getting all this attention, then and all of a sudden it's kind of dying off. Like, music itself is not a fad. Like, everyone will always want music in their life.
Yes.
And so, maybe the last thing that you didn't resonate, then do something else. As long as it's from your heart, you will find an audience for it. And it's not like you're a reality star that's going to fall out of favor and then you really have nothing else to give to bring people back to you. You know what I mean? You always can create more music. You have the art inside of you.
Exactly. And it's just at any time. It's like you can do it at any time in any which way that you want. And it's like, by the same token, I would say, if I were talking to, other artists that were just looking for advice, I feel like the other thing is to never, you were saying about fads, never follow the fad, never put yourself in a box. I mean, some of the best artists do what they want. You look at David Bowie, you look at Ryan Adams, you look at Lucinda Williams, you look at so many, you look at the Stones, oh my God, the Beatles, you look at all of some of the greatest artists. They do jazz and they do rock and they do blues and they do it all. And you don't have to put yourself into a category. And like, that is one thing that has always appealed to me. Beck, I mean, you look at Beck, there's so many of them. I mean, Bruce Springsteen is
think about what Sting did when he left the Police.
Amazing. I mean, he's one of my favorites. He's one of the best examples of it. And now he just made a rock album. And it's like, I just, after all this years of doing other things, and I just feel like those, in my life, I mean, even like U2, they've made so many different types of albums, electronic and straight up rock and punk. And it's like, that is what being an artist is. It's doing it the way you feel it. I would say to other artists that, the other thing is just to make the music that you feel that's authentic at the moment. like where you're coming from at that moment, and don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Don't worry about what you're hearing on the radio and obviously influences are going to pass through you and come back out. And that's great. A lot of times when I'm making an album, I'm listening to a lot of the same things at that particular time that are really resonating. And I'm sure they come out some way. But it's never like I'm actively trying to make the album that anybody else made. Sometimes, I'm listening to old, classic rock, or I'm listening to jazz, or whatever it is. It's like there's, like you were saying, there's always, a time and a place for music, and people always are going to listen to music. I just feel like you should never make music to be what anybody else just did because that's popular. Do what feels right. And I will say this. I mean, there's nothing wrong with writing a pop song. I mean, if it happens to be catchy, all the better, because it just has more chance, I think, in the world. If it's, if it has a chorus, if it has, the true parts of a song, if it's constructed like an actual song, if it's not 17 minutes long, you probably have more of a chance of people listening. But as long as it's good, it just has to be good. I mean, I think people nowadays, there's so much out there and there's so much crap out there. And I think people just want something good. So if you can do something good, I mean, that's where it's at. And something that's honest and authentic, and that's just true, because that's the other thing I think people can see through, BS. If it's not real, people get that.
Oh, definitely. And I think that artists tend to get myopic, and they don't think about how much there is out there. So they do need to know that when they do release something, like you said, it better be good, because there is a lot of competition. And if you are good, you will stand out because of the fact that there's just so much competition, but a lot of it is mediocre.
I think so too. And it's totally true. And another thing I would say is, take your time with the writing, or if it comes out really fast and it works that way, just, get it right. Get it to where you feel that you're behind it, where you would want to sing it that way every time. Like if you write something that you don't ever want to sing again, that's not good. It's like,
that's not a good sign.
Not a good sign. You write something that you're going to always feel, that you're going to always mean, and, the other thing is another little thing that I would just say is, if it sounds good without a lot of stuff, it's probably, that's probably the testament of a good song. Like if you need the song to have, some of the greatest songs are highly produced and they're incredible, but if you can strip it down and it still sounds good, to me, like that's really like how you know a good song. If you can just play with a guitar, play with a piano, and it still stands up, you have a good song. And like I was saying before, if it's a song that you're going to keep wanting to perform, keep wanting to sing, I have songs that I've written that they don't have the same meaning now. Some of them, it's cathartic. Sometimes I'll sing a song, like I'll do it. We just did a show live at Rockwood in New York City recently, and I did some songs that I hadn't done in a while. And man, I was like, oh my God, I'm right back to where I was when I wrote that song. And some of the songs I wrote like 9 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, I'm standing here and I'm at that immediate place in time. And then there's other songs that you don't feel them the way that you did because you've changed so much and you're at a different point in your life. Yet you bring a new meaning to them. But the words still stand up, or the melody still stands up, and you're like, oh, wow, this has a new thing for me now. Like, this is cool because now it's like a different shape on the song. It's like it fits me a little bit differently. So you sing it a little bit differently, or you play it a little bit, you arrange it a little bit differently, but it still feels good. So, that's the other thing I feel like you have to change too. Your music is going to change. You're going to change. You have to be willing to sort of ride all those changes out. And like you were saying before, if you fall out of favor with a song, with a record, or someone's talking about another artist at the moment, or you're not having your moment, that's the way life is. Like there aren't many artists in the world that are always like on the forefront of your mind. You come in, you come out, and then you hear an artist, and then you hear an artist, and then you're reminded of their earlier stuff. So like you come back around, and then your earlier stuff comes back around with it. So it's a cyclical thing that just kind of keeps going as long as you keep going.
Yeah. Yes. Don't get discouraged if you feel like it's not working at the moment. That doesn't mean it won't work next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious, you were talking about the licensing that you've gotten. How has that affected your career? Like, has it helped you gain any new fans, or is it just more about helping to fuel your career financially? Do people really know that those are your songs on, TV and film?
Well, it's funny. It's both. I would say yes, it's definitely helped fuel things financially, but also every now and again, some of the networks will actually credit you. And especially there were a whole bunch of songs I'd had a flurry of songs on MTV a while back, and they had put my name and the title of the song up as the song was playing. Especially, I've had songs like on promos, and I've had a lot of songs in shows. And sometimes during shows, they'll have like a little lower third graphic, and it'll say like Stacie Rose, this song. And once in a while, they even say the album. I've had my music on some image spots, which are just longer spots, like a 1 minute piece for a network. And at the end of the piece, like AMC did this a while back, where they put my name and my title on the back end of it, so people saw it. So I actually got, a whole bunch of emails at the time that those happened from people. Like they found my website and found the label, and they found the people and the contact, and contacted me. Asked,
Wow.
And some people went and found videos. It's funny, and it sounds a little crazy, like wow, these people were actively seeking me out, but it's kind of not, because I find when I hear a song on the radio, nowadays I'll Shazam it if I don't know it. And then I'll go look that artist up, or I'll download something, or I'll try to find out what they've done. So if you're really a music fan, and I've always been a music fan, like I will go find that artist. I will try, figure out what they're about, where they're from, when are they playing, if I like it enough. So people really will seek you out if they know who you are, if they can find you. So that was really cool that actually happened. I mean, you don't always get that lucky with shows where they'll say who you are. Sometimes you have to go to their website, and then they'll do like a track listing of all the songs, that they played in their episode. So sometimes people will actually go that far. And I don't know if most people are doing that. But
I've definitely done that before.
So, yeah.
If I've seen a song in a show, especially if it was used in a way that was really emotionally compelling with a certain scene.
Yes, me too.
And it just reminds me of that scene and the feeling that I had. And, that I'm going to want to hear that song again and remember that feeling. I will go seek it out.
And I will too. But I always think of myself as sort of the exception, but maybe not. Like maybe more and more people do that. So it has actually been helpful in that way, where people like that maybe wouldn't have known about your music before find out about you. And then they, come into your orbit, and then they're interested in your music and when you're playing. And so that's been really cool and helpful. The other thing that's kind of funny, and I don't really even know if this is actually true, but sometimes people will be like, they'll hear your song and say, I feel like I've heard that before. Like, have your songs ever been on television? And I say, yeah, they've been on a lot of shows. What are the chances that they actually did hear it on that show? Or maybe they heard it on the radio, or I don't know, maybe they heard it on a podcast. I don't know, but I often get people that say to me, I feel like I've heard that song before. I'm sure I've heard your song before. So I have to think that somehow some of this licensing is paying off one way or the other. I mean, it is paying off some. It is working. It's just that I feel like eventually people start to catch it. It's like if it happens enough times, that kind of thing.
I think too, if you have a distinctive enough voice, like I think I would recognize your voice if I heard it on a TV show.
Well, that's cool. Thank you. That's good to hear, because.
And some people don't, but some people really do have distinct voices. And I think you have one of those. And that is, I think, where it could really help, because people would notice you, and maybe they won't know exactly where they heard you and stuff, but it might just, it's like brand awareness kind of.
And
it makes you feel like if you see something enough times, it makes you feel like you know that thing, even if you've never even actually experienced it.
Definitely. And to that end, and thank you for that. And to that end, I would say, also when we were just backtracking a minute, we were talking about, what I might say to other artists. And that's a biggie, like to never be anybody else with your voice that you're not, because some of the greatest artists are great singers, interesting singers, not so great singers, but they have their own style and their own voice, and they really, really, really use their voice in their own way. And, some of my favorite artists are actually those people. They're great singers, but they're also people that just do it their way, and they just sing what they feel, the way they feel. They don't try to just sing it the way everybody else is singing it. There's this real homogeneity thing that happens with pop music. And I love pop music. And for the most part, I try to make pop music. But then there's this singing, this vocal style. And I think you could probably attest to this. You hear it and it's like the same thing over and over again. And there's just a myriad of artists that all sound the same. And it's for an independent artist, it's probably not going to work to your advantage to try to sound like anybody else.
No, not at all. And I do think there is a legion of especially female artists that I can think of that sound the same to me. And I don't know which one it is when I'm listening to the radio.
Yeah. And it's all good. A lot of it's good. It's not like
it's good.
Bad.
It's good. But
it's
are they going to really build fans, or are they going to build fans from somebody else because they think that they're them?
Well, that's the thing. So, I think just by singing the way you sing and doing, eventually people kind of catch on, and then they're like, oh, I've heard you before. You sound so familiar. So it's like just that. It's like keeping, like you said, the brand awareness, like keeping something succinct. Like even if you're kind of like going this way, going that way, trying new things, it's like there's always, somebody once said to me a long time ago, I was trying some new things musically as far as arrangement wise. And I was a little concerned early on about that. I was like, well, what if I don't sound like me? And I'm finally starting to get some sort of like awareness of my music. And I was getting a lot of press at the time. And I was like, finally feeling like I was like reaching people. And I was like, what if I do something different? And all of a sudden it's sort of like, sends people in the wrong direction. Like they don't recognize me, or they're not, it sort of works against me to do that. And, one of the musicians I was working with was like, I feel like you could do anything you want because you have your own style of songwriting, but your voice always sounds like you. No matter what you do, it always sounds like you. And it was really helpful to me early on. Like that was a helpful thing to hear because it gave me the confidence actually to just try different things. Cause I was like, okay, I've got that I feel is pretty much like, that's the way I do that. That's the way I sound. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take some chances and just know that hopefully people are going to be able to pick me out. So,
Yeah, that's definitely true. I remember when you did the Alter Ego albums and they were like, wow, that's a totally different style for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was still you, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. And at the end of the day, it's funny, like I listened to that and it still sounds like me. Like there's nothing, I don't look back on any of it and think, God, why did I do that? Like, that's weird. Other people might. It's funny because some people are like, oh, I really like when you did that other kind of thing. And some people are like, oh, I like when you stick to this other thing. And then other people are like, oh, I like you best when you do like the country-ish kind of sounding pop. And then there's always going to be people that like what they like. It's just, that's the way it is. That's the best thing about music. It's so subjective. People like what they like. But but at the same time, if you sound like you and you do what you do and you feel good about it, you can look back without regrets and be like, I'm doing what feels right.
Now, I know you've done some interesting things with video too. How has that helped your career? I remember you did kind of like little mini stories in a way. What were those?
Yeah, I try to remember what they were. That was Sweet Songs. And I hope to get back to that and do like another round of those, even though that was a while ago. But the concept was so much fun. I worked with a filmmaker named Patricia Chica. And my friend Robert Smith had introduced me to her, and I've done so much music with Robert. And I mentioned him because he was very instrumental in the whole project also. But we were just brainstorming one day, me and Robert, and I told him, this idea I had, and we spoke about it for a while. And he's like, oh my God, I know the person that would be perfect to do this with. And it was Patricia, and I spoke with her, and it was this collaborative thing. We all kind of threw our ideas in, and the whole premise of it is that we picked a neutral spot, and it happened to be a hotel suite. And the idea was I would bring a song in that was kind of just, partially written or had just been written. And I bring a bunch of my favorite musician friends into the hotel room. And we just all jam together and work on the song and record it from the ground up. And I do a little bit of talking about how the song came to be. So you get the sense of how a song is kind of born, how it's written, and how it might come together. But at the same time, it's kind of this hang.
Yeah, I am remembering it now.
Yeah.
I'm watching one of them, and it's a cool, that's even more than behind the scenes. That's like come along with me as I create something, which I think is really interesting, especially to people that aren't musicians, because they have no idea what that process is like. And then to musicians, I think it feels like, oh yeah. And it like brings back memories of the studio and, fun stuff.
Totally. And I think what sparked that idea is that a lot of people were asking me about my process at the time. It happened that more than a few people were asking me about the process of songwriting and the process of recording and arranging and working with different people. And I was like, it'd be cool to do something to showcase that, but in a really sort of cool, grassroots, but just like a very like non-pretentious way. Just like how it really is, like how it would really be to just write a song and be in a room with a bunch of people that you really love working with, and how a song might come together. And to me, the thing about this that made it so much fun for me is you're in a different head when you write music than you are when you record it. They're two totally different places to be. And maybe some people feel differently about that, but for me personally, when I write, it's often in a vacuum. And then when I record, it's like another phase with other people. And it's so collaborative. And it's come to be one of the things I love the most about making music is the collaborative aspect of it. And that Sweet Songs, we did 3 different episodes. We split it up into 3 episodes and with 3 different songs. And it really speaks to the collaborative nature of making music and how fantastic music becomes when you add the collaboration aspect to it.
Did you get a really good response from your fans?
It was amazing. And it was great. Like it got such a great response. And I think the musicians enjoyed it and we enjoyed it. And I loved working with Patricia with, the filming of it and then the editing, working with the editor on it. And it was so much fun. It was so well received. And it was just, it felt so me. Like it just felt like if I ever had to have a pet project, that's what it would be. So, I'm actually hoping to do it again. The whole idea was to do it in New York City and then maybe do it in Nashville and maybe do one in California, maybe one in Miami. And then I just got involved in so many other things that it's just a matter of like time and scheduling. And of course, money, to fund it. But I really hope to do more of them at some point.
That would be cool. Come do one in California. I would love to come.
I would love it. And I have a lot of friends.
I'll come sing backup for you.
Yes, that would be great. And I have a lot of musician friends in California. So that would actually be like to do one in LA. That would be awesome. So I will let you know.
Cool. Well, we've talked about so much amazing stuff. I cannot believe it. It's been almost an hour that I've been talking to you.
Well, I forgot to mention one crazy thing just as a sidebar, but you had asked me early on a personal thing. And another thing that's just totally off the beaten path and crazy, but I recently, I'm sort of like a health nut, and I recently started working on health coaching on the side. Wow. On the side. I know it's a whole different thing, but making music and doing anything else in your life, you have to be well. You have to feel well to do anything, and especially to make music because it takes a lot of energy out of you. And I had gone through a few little health crises. Thankfully, everything's okay now. But it really put me in a space where I just wanted to be well, take care of myself as much as possible and learn everything I could about nutrition and health. And I've been studying integrative nutrition, and I started actually doing some health coaching on the side and trying to help other people feel better.
I think that's awesome. I actually did an episode a few episodes back with Samantha Holmes all about that.
Really?
Yeah. She had candida and, she was just a mess. And then, she figured out what worked for her health wise. But I just think it's so important to talk about that because I remember when I was touring, like it's so easy to just eat crap.
Oh God,
because because it's, it's time, it's weird times, you're in a rush, it's, you never have anything that you need when you need it. And, and so we can get into this trap of like, oh, I'll deal with this when I get home. And by the time we get home, we're such a health mess.
Yes.
So I think that's a great point to bring to everyone's mind. In order to keep our career going, we have to keep a well instrument, and our instrument isn't just our voice. It's not just our hands, it's our entire body.
Yes. And that's exactly why I brought it up just now, because it's like, you need to feel well to create. You need to be able to have everything working for you, to be able to play in clubs or to tour or to record, to get out of the house and be playing guitar and singing you need a lot of energy to sing. Singing is very physical. So if you're not feeling well, it's hard to do your best. So it's really, really important. So I've been, trying to help other people along the way, and that's been super rewarding lately.
I think that's really cool. I actually suffer from Crohn's disease, and I have to keep very, very up on that because it can mess you up so quickly.
Yeah, well, that's really serious. So
especially the older we get, darn it, getting older it sucks.
Yeah, and you have to work harder to like keep everything in balance and make sure that you're, on the mark. You have to work at it a little bit more. So you get it. It's you learn, you live and you learn, and it's all a journey, and it's just recalibrating as you go along, and figuring out what works and how to make it all work.
Yep. That's what it's all about. Well, we had so much great stuff that we've talked about. I can't believe that we are done.
Yeah, I'm so glad.
But I feel like I could talk to you for another hour. I want you to let everybody know where they can find you and where they can hear your music and buy your music and watch you perform and all that stuff. Where's the best way for people to connect with you online?
Okay, well, you can go right to my website, which is stacierose.com. And I think you can also get there, stacierosemusic.com.
And make sure that's a STACIE.
Thank you for that. Stacie Rose with an I.
I don't know many people that spell it that way, so I love the uniqueness of that.
Thank you. Yeah, my mom says that she was a little drugged up when I was born. They gave her.
She spelled it wrong.
They gave her so many drugs that's how she spelled it. But I'm glad she did because it's different. So Stacie with an IE, Stacie Rose ROSE, and my website. And I'm on SoundCloud. I'm on YouTube. I'm on iTunes, Spotify. I'm on Pandora. So I'm pretty out there, and I would love for you to come find me. I mostly play in the New York City area, but I do get out of town sometimes. So I do get to other places. So if you're interested in hearing my music, reach out because I would love to.
Get on her mailing list.
Yes.
She, keeps in touch and has a lot of interesting things that come through. So, make sure you get on the list and stay in the know of what's going on in Stacie Rose land.
Absolutely. I would love it.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a fantastic day. We really appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge and experience. And I know that people that listen to this show are really going to benefit from everything you shared today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great. Thank you.
Now go out and make great music, connect with your fans, and grow your business. Female Entrepreneur Musician has been brought to you by FEM69.com and FemaleMusicianAcademy.com. With editing by Jen Eads of 317 Sound Design and music by Stella Ronson.